Hey, everybody. I hope you all got a chance to get some water and do a stretch and are ready for the next talk. Kasturi is part of the InfoSec CERT team at Equinix and is responsible for managing the West Region IR team. She's been with Equinix since 2017 and has performed various different roles during her time there. She's passionate about cybersecurity space and loves doing incident response. Outside of work, you're going to get to hear about her special affection towards lifting weights. She recently took part in a bodybuilding competition. She also likes making dessert alternatives that are packed with protein and gets to devour them guilt-free. I am envious. And now, Runbooks and bodybuilding.
Thank you so much, Nicole, for the kind introduction. Hey everyone, hope you're having a great day today, and lovely hearing to all the speakers, and it's been a good ride. Before starting, I would really like to thank Leslie and rest of the team for giving this opportunity and helping us out here and giving a platform to present and share whatever the knowledge we have, right? So thank you so much from bottom of my heart. And myself, Kasturi, and as Nicole said, I work at Equinix. Before beginning, I really want to give a special shout out to my whole team who has equally contributed and to developing this process and implementing it to the core, right? So we are going to talk to you about Runbooks. And the agenda is going to be like Runbooks, how the development process looks like, what development standards did we use, what is the use of a Runbook committee in it. And then the part 2 of my talk is going to be about like bodybuilding. Why did I enter that space, and how was the journey to the competition day, right? So just going to share a little bit glimpse of that. So Runbooks, I think this is a very common thing which people end up hearing in the security space, right? So I would say Runbook is nothing but like a step-by-step guide or a recipe that provides detailed instructions on how to complete specific tasks in a quick and efficient manner. And in particularly in our InfoSec world, right, it's a recipe on how to respond to like commonly occurring in security incidents. That's for like, usually we create Runbooks for those type of things, right? So if you see every day in operations and incident response looks different, and it's a combination of like planned and unplanned work. We sometimes come across incidents which are like repetitive in nature, and sometimes we deal with incidents where we don't know a solution offhand, right? So in that situation, like it could take a lot of time to find out a solution on what needs to be done, like digging through company documents, asking a coworker, or escalating these issues, and it would need like you would end up spending hours in finding a solution, right? Like, but if you have some documents ready in hand, like, like, hey, so while responding to incident, you can definitely categorize the type of incident based on like the initial scope of analysis, right? And if you have some run books or processes in place, then it can at least give you a head start on how you can respond to that particular incident, right? So run books definitely help in those places where a new responder or a new person on the team, they don't know, like they're still learning on the dynamics of the team and how the processes works here, right? So this can be one of the most easiest way for them to learn and get a head start on things, right? So, and from my experience, I have come across, right, I feel like even while having accountability with stakeholders, right? Runbook can be like one of the most straightforward way, because if you have documented records of like, hey, this process is owned by this particular team, then I think it's very easy and clear. It gives a crystal clear scope of like who is going to do what, right? So that's where I think Runbooks, that's why I feel like Runbooks are useful. And then and they are also a key supplementing document to an incident response plan. And they can be very useful, like while supporting audits or compliance related activities, right? Like when your company is going through some audits and they want to identify like what are the processes behind it, these supporting documents can come to a rescue, and like they know, like, and it also talks about the maturity of the program that you have, right? More clearer processes shows how much deeply you care about the incident response function and how much energy you are putting in like smoothing out these processes, right? So that's my take on Runbooks. And it can be done in like like how to choose, like how many run books should you have, right? Like it totally depends on your organizational structure. What are the type of incidents that you day to day see? Like, is it easy? Like, what type of common scenarios that you want to solve using run books? Like, how can you get rid of the like the run books also can be a very good foundationing stone, like for creating automation in future, right? So, yeah, so we also went through this whole process on like, hey, what type of run book should we use? We spent a good time of like writing step-by-step manuals and all those type of good things, right? But then it was somehow not working out for us. Like writing those manuals was so time consuming, and people would just lose track while going through the whole documenting processes, right? So that's why we made a shift towards graphical run books. And it changed the game like for us a lot, right? Like because everything was on one screen, we would just know like what comes after this. That visual aid of seeing the process flowing from one task to other changed the whole thing for us. And I think we could also, I'm going to talk about like how we developed the template, how the process flow looked like and all that, right? Like why graphical run book? So how did we land upon that, right? So we will go through it, but just want to give a little bit background on like why we chose that, like, and while developing runbook, what are the things you should keep in mind, right? It's very important to like keep it clear and simple. Don't clutter it by writing like so many details. Like use language that is like easy to understand and follow. Make it specific to your process. It needs to be relatable. Everyone who's reading to that runbook should know like, hey, it should be clear basically, right? And then it should be also flexible and adaptable to whatever the changes in technology or system that your organization or your company might go through, right? So easily adjustable runbooks is what anyone would prefer. So as we move forward, I want to say that like this presentation is not about talking about like how to create runbooks, right? It's more going to be about like standardization of the runbook process. How can you curate runbooks? How does the development process can be made more efficient? How would you like how quality matters over quantity, right? So I'm going to talk about those pieces, right? So the development process. I plan to divide the development process in these particular formats, right? Where it's going to have a process flow, which consists of some approval gates, so that it helps you to promote consistency and reduce the variations to generate like high quality runbooks, right? So we will deep dive into all these approval gates, but just to give an idea, like we have three approval gates. Like we divided the approval gates in like three different areas, which is like one is led by the runbook committee. They basically ensure like everything is accurate, and I promise you will get to see all this in detail like as we move forward, right? So runbook committee, and then we have a stakeholder gate where which ensures that like all objectives are clear and achievable by all the parties who are expected to make decisions in that runbook, right? And finally, a management approval gate that ensures that we are providing a consistent response and minimizing the risk of use per minimizing the risk of producing like good quality runbooks, right? So yeah, and then moving along after the process flow, we will also talk about what development standards are, like providing for a runbook template, general standards, having a shape bank, what's the importance of tracking and versioning, and then finally the runbook committee, who's responsible for like documenting approvals and smooth adoption of process and implementation of this process, right? So that's how we're gonna move, right? So the first take is gonna be for the process flow. As earlier mentioned, we chose a graphical runbook approach for our runbooks, and the tool that we use, the software which we used for this is called as Lucidchart. It's basically a web-based diagramming application that allows you to visually collaborate and draw and like share diagrams across your team and keep like art, right? Um, so giving a brief about, so I'm going to go through this whole process and how we adapted to it, right? So you can see there are multiple swim lanes here. Each swim lane signifies, for example, we have a process developer who is going to be a runbook owner in this case. We have a peer reviewer. We have a lane for runbook committee. We have a lane for process stakeholders. and a management approval ring, right? So any run book before going to production has to follow this development process cycle. They have to go via these. They need to follow the process and standards. And initially it felt like, oh my God, that's a lot of gates to go through. But as we move forward and as we did a few cycles of this, it was such an adaptable process. Now it feels like next nature to us. We don't even think about, oh my God, there's a lot, right? So I'm just going to give a brief breakdown on how we did it and all that, right? So yeah, as you can see, the process map, right? It has, so we start, we determine, so the runbook owner, right? Like suppose there is a task that a person needs to identify, develop a runbook on DDoS, right? So the runbook owner is going to determine who are all the process stakeholders in this case, right? They are going to determine like if they need any collaboration with other teams in this regard, like to develop this runbook, right? Like, is it just only related to the IR team, or there are going to be other teams, like maybe product security team or any customer-facing teams that needs to be involved for any DDoS activities, or like the team who manages WAF and all those type of things, right? So the owner will gather all these details, and then they will determine like, hey, do we need a collaboration with the stakeholder for preparing an initial draft? If they feel yes, then they go and meet with the stakeholder, they collaborate, they gather all the requirements, and then come back and complete the draft based on whatever the approved template we have. So I'll shortly show you what template it is and how we have mapped it to the how we have made it relatable to the IR process, right? So once that is complete, then they set up a version for that, and 0.1 is always an initial draft version. Once that is done, they do an initial peer review, right? So peer review is we feel it's important. Like, why peer reviews, right? It's important because some people in the team are like more mature responders versus like beginners, and we cycle through like who creates these runbooks, right? So it's always good to have an extra set of ears and like show them on what is your thought process, how is this going to reflect in your end goal, right? So having that peer review early on helps you to realign if needed, and also incorporate whatever the feedback is, right? So that's why we put this first step here. And then once that's done, you go and request. So, and assuming like you are going to work with a lot of stakeholders based on different teams in your organization, right? So once a draft is done, you request the stakeholder that like, hey, this is the process, can you please review and provide any feedback? Once they provide whatever the feedback is, you incorporate that, and then you come to gate one. Gate one is what is the runbook committee. They are responsible for making sure that like you are following all the generic standards which are laid by the committee, so that like you have clear. Yeah, the runbook committee basically oversees all the standards, right? So once you get an approval, like, and if the process doesn't meet standards, the runbook committee will comment on the lucid chart where you have developed the runbook, and they will provide feedback, and you go back and work on the feedback, and then again request a committee for review. And once runbook committee approves, you go to the standard versioning X.4, right? Once it happens, then you go and held a meeting with stakeholder approvals again, right? Like you meet with all the stakeholders in a particular meeting, like all teams come together, you show them your whole process and like how it looked in a tied up format, right? So walk them down through the whole process. Hey, this is the runbook. These are the ownership tasks that your team might come across when we are publishing this runbook, right? Once you get an approval on that, if they agree with the process, they would give you an approval, and then you go to the next step. If not, if they indicate any issues, you work back internally with your team, figure out what's happening, how can you inculcate that feedback, and then again go for an approval gate. So as I said, initially it felt like a lot of gates and approvals, but what worked was involving the stakeholders while building the process made them part of the process, right? And they felt like, hey, they can contribute somewhere. They can also talk about what pain points they had, right? So this tremendously changed the dynamic for us because it showed an active participation from them and how they because it's very common in companies that, right, like because everyone is having such a busy work day that they don't want to get out of their day to day and like help in things because of what are the responsibilities they have, right? But if you try to include them since the beginning and make them part of the process, this automatically goes into their uh, activities, and I think and involving those stakeholders has also helped us to remove any assumptions out of the process, right? Because if we include them, then they can tell him, hey, this is not going to work this way if you just put it, right? So they might have different workarounds or stuff like that, right? So I think it has helped us a lot having a stakeholder approval gate. And once that's done, the final approval gate is going to be about CERT management, which is like the incident response team management, right? Like, and the only reason for having this is to make sure that like we are aligned with whatever the end goals that management has for this, for Runbooks or this particular process in terms, right? So it's no way to like getting the final stamp or something like that. It's just to make sure, hey, this aligns, because there can be situations when sometimes the requirements changes and ICs on the team might not be completely aware of the whatever the shift in the dynamics and all that, right? So having that management level visibility helps us to realign whenever needed, right? So that was a whole process or idea behind like why we chose a management gate. And this is how like any runbook would look, right? Like if you see DDoS, I would still do a graphical format like this, make sure whatever the stuff is required, we put it here, right? And we also have an approval corner on here where I think this is a good cue to move towards the template, right? So this is, sorry. So this is the, oh my God, sorry. So this is the runbook template which we have, right? Like where you can have a runbook name, it has a versioning standard. And yeah, so we created a template across that aligns with the NIST IR cycle, right? Like because in our IR plan, we talk about the NIST incident response life cycle, right? So it was important for us to align with the standards. So what we did is like we took two like different swim lanes and we divided the template in phases such as preparation, detection and analysis, containment, eradication and recovery, and post-incident. So it helped. So we divide the tasks based on these phases. These swim lanes can be used for the swim lanes that you see, right? Like particular teams like SOC, GRC, legal, HR, whoever you work with on that particular runbook, any cross-functional stakeholders, you can create a separate swim lane for each of them, and then work from there, right? So I think and having these phases helped us to get a clear understanding of like, hey, this section has to be analysis, this has to be stopped here, and once it goes to containment, the mind shift is there, right? So and visualizing this and anticipating the next move helped us a lot, right? And I think we did some like default standards on like how the runbook flow should be, right? Like we set basic standards on the template is always going to move from left to right. The flow is always going to move from left to right and top to bottom. So you start with like incident reporter and move forward from there, right? And we have seen like we have also kept a column for references where you can note down like in preparation phases, right? Like you can put down references on like what plans do you need to build, like you can link specific documents here or create charts that you come across and link them here, right? Any supplementing document or information can be put down in the reference phases. So yeah, and as you see here on the top right corner, right, there is an approval block. And in the type, so it is divided in type, date, approval, and organization, right? So first one is the quality assurance. It is quality assurance is to make sure that we have consistent run books, be in whatever font, like font sizes, cases, or anything, right? Like whatever the standards we have laid out, is this run book is this run book following those standards, right? If you have those, then only the quality assurance check is given, and then you put a date and the approver name and which organization did that. In this case, it would be the Runbook committee doing the quality assurance, right? And then you can type out names for each of, let's suppose SOC, CERT, the GRC team you have, the threat intel team you have, and they can approve for their specific processes and ownership of things here. And then you can account those details here, right? So it's important to have approvals from stakeholder for the accountability, and also making them as part of the process, right? So other general standards that we wanted to include were like formatting standards about what type of how would the swim lane look, what edges are you using, what text format are you using, do you want to be like, we went to a detail level where like specified about maybe use this text font for this type of boxes, use this font size, use and there is a lot of opportunity to be creative here, right? And you can define whatever works the best for your company or your team, right? And take it from there. You don't have to be like, go to the nitty-gritty detail in the very first phase. It's of course an evolving process, but it's good to have everything laid out so that anyone who wants to create a run book or who's going to pick up on things like this, it would be very easy for them just to reference that page and having a clear guideline to start with, right? So, yeah, I highly recommend having a format standard. And then, as you saw, like it was important for us to have an approval block too, right? And how are you documenting approvals? So we also make sure that like we attach a copy of approvals from stakeholders for future reference, because that will help us to revisit in any case, right? Like any changes were made. If a person leaves if an approver who was initially an approver, they leave the company, how are you going to determine like what were the notes from that particular conversation while developing this run book, right? So documenting approvals in terms like by attaching copies of approval documents is very helpful. And then yeah, we also created a shape bank that consisting of like common shapes that would be used throughout the run book. And that would talk about like the common uses and attributes for each shape. You can define like whatever the color you need to have for those shapes. Like as you saw here, there were some decision boxes, and these decision boxes are painted in yellow. And so the shape bank looks like this, right? And we made sure that this shape bank is available even in the template, right? So we published a generalized template, which you saw here. And at the bottom of it, there would be a shape bank so that the users can just like copy paste the shapes and start building. You see the common shape banks here, right? Like, and we went a step ahead, and so you see a hyperlink box here, right? Like whenever they see this red border line, they know like, hey, it's a link. There is a hyperlink embedded in the box. You can link up processes within a process via this. You can link document pages or any other Lucidchart link as well, right? So it comes in pretty handy when like you have to do a big process, but there are subsections and just link them. And you can define color coding combinations as well on what works the best. So we decided to go with Equinix colors like red, black, gray, and that was the font color that the theme which we wanted to use. So this is in no means that like you have to stick to these colors, right? So just define what each of these boxes mean to you, like what type of font do you want to use, like do you want to have a title case, sentence case within these, right? So a system name, basically if you are writing down a process for something, then you also define like where does that process occur. Like suppose you want to send out, if you want to send out an Outlook, if you want to send out an email, notifying to another party, like, hey, something like this has happened, what to do next, right? So you can just say Outlook and notify this team of this activity, right? So it can go to those details, and then decision boxes can be in this color, and they are usually used to define the next step of the process, and depends on like what a certain condition or answer is, right? So we usually keep it to a rule of format, right? Like always the right should be an yes. We try to abide by those, but in some cases when the graph is just going too much, we are okay, we loosely follow that. But the flow has to be from left to right. There's no change in that. And then top to bottom, right? So we task or stack things in that way. So yeah, you can create a shape bank, and tracking and versioning, right? It's very important. Why versioning? Because suppose if I am overlooking a runbook process and I see giving this versioning, looking at this versioning, I would immediately know where the runbook is at currently, right? Anytime if you see a 0.1, which means this is the first time it's a process draft, it's not published yet. So that gives me a clear indication of like what is happening. And then 0.2 means a peer review has been completed. 0.4 means a runbook committee approval was already done, right? So I think having these versionings, and you saw those versionings in the initial process flow where I showed you, right? Like the owners would mark the runbooks at each level once how they move across the flow, right? So for anyone, like anyone who is viewing, it would be very easy to pick up on or even get an estimate on like how much time is left. If I want to, I don't have to go and ask the runbook owner on like, hey, how much time would you need to finish it, right? So based on, I could just gauge an estimate on like how much is. So it's very important to have versioning, and also like review cycle, right? It's equal. It's yeah. So sorry. While publishing standards, right? So it's important to determine what type of oh my god, sorry, it's important to determine what type of standards you need to use while publishing, right? Like where do you want to host these runbooks? Give a thought to that, because you don't want one like uh, if your team is having a standard location for hosting all your incident response knowledge base or documents, right? Make sure it's a collective folder where it's going to be in one-stop shop for everything, so that they don't have to go on running looking over 10 different places for all these documents, right? So while we are public, like once the runbook reaches to a production level, what we do is we create a different page, and we use Confluence for hosting these documents. And I think I had found using Confluence very easy, and like it's very user friendly, and you can have a tree structure in there. So that's been like really helpful. So while publishing any runbook, right? So we add the runbook name, what was the last review date, and that helps us to identify where is it in the review cycle? Like, when do we need to review it again, right? So the last review date is important. What's the current status? Is it active in production or in production, but still under review, right? Those type of statuses which we do, or if it's a deprecated run book, then you can still change the status to inactive or deprecated, those type of things. And then you give a runbook description about, give a summary, right? So whoever is looking, they might know what is going on. And then you reference whatever the templates here, and then you can insert a lucid chart diagram here, so they can see the runbook itself and any related articles around that runbook. And also you can attach your approval documents. You can put screenshots of like maybe if you had approvals over Teams conversations, put screenshots of those, or also attach your email copies and whatever the information that can be helpful for people who are gonna look at it later, right? So that's been so those are the standards which we kept in mind. And now moving forward to the very crucial piece of this is the runbook committee, right? So why establishing this runbook committee helped us to give an overall, like, I think they're the gatekeepers for this whole process, right? They are responsible to maintain the existing standards and determine like what is lacking, what is the gap, what new updates can be added to the standards, and such a fun and creative activity. It also, so I have seen it helped amongst all the responders, like to have that healthy competition to come up with new ideas, and gives also, and we did a like committee assignment schedule, right? Like every quarter there would be a different committee, like committee chair, committee member, and the management sponsor as well, right? So everyone on the team gets enough exposure towards these things, and you develop like you develop skills like leading a team, like for a small subset, like, and give constructive feedback at times, and how can you improvise the processes, and helps you in that, right? So we defined roles for all these committee, like all these members, right? Like committee chair is responsible of like setting meeting agendas, attend review meetings, propose new standards, and feedback to the developers, and yeah, like providing gate one approval and those type of things, right? And whereas the member is responsible for adhering to all the approved runbook standards, propose new standards, and the management sponsor is usually responsible for establishing the quarterly requirements and expectations. And also the management sponsors represents the management team based on like, has the prioritization shifted, and those type of things, right? So as I said, and you can also extend the, like if you are a lean team, then maybe you can you don't have to do it quarterly. You can do 6 monthly rotations, and you're not going to curate so many run books in a year, right? So it's not going to be like too much of work as well. So make sure to define like how many run books do you want to curate in that year, and how does it look, and how much of overhead it's going to cost, right? So be mindful of those things as well. So yeah. And periodic review process, right? Developing runbooks is one thing, but there has to be they have to be periodically reviewed, right? You can, based on your company's nature and organization's nature, or like how often the technology and processes or the dynamics shift in your organization, you can decide on a review cycle, right? So here we do like a 6 monthly review based on, we identify like, based on the last review dates, we see like if any runbook which was produced within the last 6 months, that are off the limits, right? If anything which is older than 6 months, we reach out to the owners and figure out like, hey, do you think anything has changed? So the runbook owner, even after production, is still the point of contact for that particular runbook, and they would have a good say because they are the ones who are actively managing the runbook. And so we would reach out to the runbook owner, identify if anything can be changed in this, and take those remarks, and it then goes back to the runbook committee, and then runbook committee based on runbook committee then assigns these runbooks, and it goes through the whole cycle, right? That's what I would say. And as we close this part, I would like to say like it takes a lot of patience and resilience to make it work. You need to work with the process owner to understand the pain points and create solutions around it, right? So it takes a lot of time, and yeah. So yeah, moving to the next part, right? I can like actually spare 2 minutes for questions here, and then go to the next part of the phase.
I think the biggest question here was someone at their workplace liked what you had put together, but they only have Visio, PowerPoint, Mind Map, and Confluence. Is Lucidchart something they would have to look at, or would one of those tools kind of be a substitute for Lucidchart?
Yeah. Visio is like, I think Lucid is like a superpower version of, I think you can easily do this in Visio is what I would say. Lucid is, I felt, was more user-friendly and intuitive, but this can be definitely done in Visio.
So, okay, they can start with Visio, and then if the team gets all excited about it, then maybe they can add Lucidchart.
Totally, yeah. And I think Confluence does have integrations with Visio as well, so it should be okay.
All right, awesome.
All right. Okay. yeah, so moving forward to bodybuilding, right? Like why, so I did a complete whole prep for 10 months, and what more than 10 months actually. I'm like, want to say like how this year of bodybuilding felt like, right? It just felt like I discovered myself more during these 10 months. And that's why this is a little snapshot here. Like this is the beginning of loving yourself and welcome home. Why I say that is because I learned a lot more while going through that process than ever. I mean, like it was a lot of introspection, and that's why could say that, right? So um, my why, right? It was my first time competing. Before deciding to compete, I started lifting weights like 5 years ago, and I was a good 190 pounds. Uh, the whole reason I started was I wanted to live a healthy lifestyle, and I didn't want to wait for any illness to start valuing wellness, right? So that was the reason, like, hey, I want to change the way I live and all that. So I started working out and lifting weights, and it just gave me tremendous joy. Every time I would finish a session, I would just feel so good and productive and everything, right? So by when I decided like to compete, I was at a good point where I had a good relationship with food and like working out, and like that was not a big problem for me. But reaching to that point, right, I always felt like people look for motivation. I feel like motivation is very much overrated. Consistency is the key. You need to keep going at it every day, no matter what, right? And this process definitely uh, put an attestation mark on that, right? Like the way the discipline it showed me, like it used to be a very cruel routine, like where you need to spend like at least I needed to complete like 20K steps a day and then work out 6 times a week and then learn posing. Posing was one of my biggest challenge, right? Like you have to have like so on the day, like you have to go around and strike some poses to show off the muscles and everything, right? And it has to be done so gracefully. The sport is very rough, I would say, but then you have to still show that composite nature and like be so graceful at the same time, right? So posing was the hardest part, and also like uh preparing mind for hard things, right? That's why I chose to do. Somewhere I recently learned about putting putting yourself the reason to deliberately do hard things in a when a non self-elected challenge arrives in your life, you can tell yourself that like, hey, I know how to get past this particular situation. I can do hard things. I can challenge myself. Having that comfort in your head when you have the luxury of putting yourself through hardships, I think that is a completely whole different mind shift, right? So uh that was my one of my whys, that like, hey, yes, let's test out our limits, right? Like how much can we go further? And one thing I've learned is nothing comes, like everything has its own cost, right? Like you have to commit something to something for long enough. You have to keep doing it even if it's tiring, and that's what discipline is about. Like universe works through like repetitions and compounding, right? Like no matter what, you have to wake up, you have to go get these things done. So, and this can be applied in every forms of life, right? It's just not bodybuilding. But so that was it. And then, as I said, like people work towards physical, financial independence, but I would like to say physical independence is also equally important at that pace, right? And there is. And where I am from, like I am from India, and there is still such a social stigma that like, hey, women should not lift weights. You are gonna look bulky and this and that. That is not true, so true. And then I wanted to cross that line, and I was like, no, this is not, everyone can do it. And such a beautiful body, and you can do a lot more, right? So, and the mental growth, right? Like putting yourself through such difficult situations um, teaches you a lot more than uh, like passing through those uncomfortable situations, right? Like it helps you the control on the temptations, you feel like you can still like you understand after a point that you can control the controllables only, and anything beyond that, it's not in your hand, right? So this is what I learned during this, that like uh, yeah. So and the journey and some thoughts, right? Like the best advice I received during this was like to embrace the suck. Like every day used to be so hard because you are on so low calories for the whole time, and you still have to go with your 9 to 5 routine. Like you still have to work, you have to get those 20K steps in, work 6 times a week, do those posing practices, cook every meal. You cannot go out and eat with people. You have to carry your own meals everywhere. And it was such a dramatic change in life. But people gave the advice from fellow competitors was embrace the suck. It's you who decided yourself to put in this situation, right? So it was your decision that led you to here, right? So accept it and move forward from there. And I think it applies in other forms of life too. It showed me immense gratitude towards food, and what a well-functioning body I have, ability to get some sleep, having those people in life who are rooting for you, right? So it used to give me a flashback. Like every time my coach went, he used to tell me about, hey, your calories are going to be dropped now for this. Uh, Calories are going to be dropped further. I used to like literally cry, but there was a sense of accomplishment there too. Like, hey, even after so many hardships, I am moving forward. I'm taking one day at a time. I'm like actually trying to like actually learning how time management would work. I did multiple combinations of things, and the attitude I kept was one step at a time, and let's move forward. However, how much ever big or small the win is, let's do it. I was very much like, I learned how to be vocal during this time, right? How can you uh teach, like being vocal in a way that like, hey, holding, like talk openly about the journey, talk openly about what you are struggling through during those times, and people are there to help you out and listen and all that, right? Like I didn't succumb everything in myself and like, yeah, no, I cannot do more. So that was the thing. And then acceptance, and then being vulnerable too, right? Like it's a completely different dynamic. um, and there were certain times when I was like, I don't think so I can, it's such a grueling routine that I don't think so I can do it anymore. But then just accept it, I accepted it and still do it, right? So that was it. And also relation, like social life, right? It was so hard that you have such a limited amount of energy left within you. And this period gave me a clarity of understanding like what every relationship means to me, right? Like what place my friends have in my life, what my family, how the backing and everything. It was just an euphoria moments like all over during this whole time, right? Where there was a lot of introspection and everything. And I think anyone who is going through any challenging situations can relate, be in one or other form, right? So and I ate the best food. So even if the macros were very less, I ate the amazing food. I developed a very good, I cooked so many colorful meals, and I used to look forward to this part of my day and be really happy, even if after every meal I used to be so hungry. But just the cooking food, just it's one of my love language. And I just made amazing desserts and everything using protein. Like you see a stack of pancakes here, and the matcha and the rose filling on the top and all that. So made really good food. And the day came, it took so much courage to represent myself in this form on that stage. And uh, especially like the background I come from, I don't think so. Like no one was comfortable for. I mean, it took me so much to go on the stage and represent myself in this form, right? So, and the biggest takeaway I would say from this 10 months journey was like how limited I need to live life and yet enjoy life, right? Like every meal, every social situation. You don't need a lot to enjoy life, right? You just need to have awareness around it on like how much you need. So, and yeah, that was it. And questions, and thank you. Thank you so much for listening to me. And yeah.
So we've got two questions right here. One of them is, how were you able to balance the mental fatigue of bodybuilding prep and balancing your work responsibilities? When they cut weight, they find that they have fatigue cognitively as well.
Oh yeah, it was a lot. That was my biggest challenge, right? Because in the head, everything used to be like, oh my God, there's a lot. So I definitely relied upon people around me. I made sure like, hey, these are the like prioritize your tasks, right? Like I think we end up making a lot of noise in the brain. So I used to write it down on what's left and also prioritize on the day. This needs to be done, this can wait. And also don't be shy on taking help from people. And if you are feeling a lot of brain fatigue, take a day off, eat some a good meal that might help you to regenerate, and take some rest. And good sleep also helps. So yeah.
And then the other question is, do you know of a external example for applying rule books that this person could show their coworkers as a starting place for a discussion about their effectiveness or what they look like?
Sorry, can you say it once again? Sorry.
Yep. Is there an external example, like a website or a book or something, of these run books that they could show their coworkers as a starting place for a discussion with them?
Um, So I have not seen a graphical format, but any like if you see for any sort of automation type of run books, you should still get an like close match of this. And I think PagerDuty also has like really good documentation about run books and incident response in general. So you can refer those. And if you need any help, like you can reach out to me as well. And yeah, I'll be happy to guide through that.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Everybody definitely is hyped up about this talk.
Thank you so much, Nicole. Thanks, everyone.